In this lesson, we'll discuss what you should know to really make the most of the course. So let's look at the fundamentals of how the web works. We start with the web browser. Now it's simply an application which knows how to send HTTP requests and render the returned code into a graphical page. Now to most people, a browser is simply that blue E icon on their desktop. But of course there are others such as Firefox, Chrome, Safari and Opera. So someone types a web address into their browser or clicks on a link which sends a request for a web page. Now that request is routed onto the internet where magical pixies work out where it needs to go. Ultimately, the request ends up at a server which knows that it needs to return a web page. Now that might be a static file, or it might run a program written in PHP, .NET, Ruby or Python which generates HTML. So the HTML code is returned back via the internet to your web browser. Now the browser understands HTML. It recognizes commands to fetch other files, images, style sheets, and JavaScript code. And all these resources are retrieved using similar requests. So once it has all the components, it can display a completed page. So in this course, we'll primarily be discussing code which runs client-side. That's JavaScript applications which use the HTML5 browser APIs. So it'll help if you have a basic understanding of HTML5 before attempting this course. Now in these videos we'll be referring to HTML5, but it really doesn't matter if you prefer HTML4 or XHTML1. In essence, HTML is responsible for your content. That's your text and your images. Now we mark content using special tags which are denoted with greater and less than signs. In this case we have a P tag which denotes a paragraph. Also note there's a closing tag with a slash which marks the end of that item. Now HTML has many tags for headings, bullet lists, images, sections and forms. It'll help if you know a few, but most are self-explanatory. Now any tag can be assigned an ID. That ID is a unique name within the page. There is only one tag which can have the ID widget, and that's because you might only ever have one widget on the page. Now any tag can also have a class. Classes are similar to IDs except they can apply to any number of elements. For example, we might want to display error messages, and there could be more than one on the page. Cascading style sheets control the layout of how the browser positions and styles the HTML content within your page. So a CSS rule starts with a selector, and these can be quite complex. But in this example, it's simply targeting a paragraph tag. Now a set of rules follow in these squiggly braces. So in this case, we're aligning the text to the left, and we're setting the color to black. We can also target elements which have a specific ID using a hash followed by the ID name. Now remember there can only be one element on our page with the ID of widget. And in this case, it's going to add a border, which is a pixel in width, it's solid and blue. Finally, we can target elements by their class. And to do that, we use a period followed by the class name. Now in this case, we've actually been a little more specific and said that it's only paragraph tags that we're interested in. So any paragraph tag with a class of error will have a color of red applied. And of course, that overrides the black we've set up here. Now JavaScript is a computer programming language which controls functionality and allows you to add interactive components to your page. Now JavaScript does things a little differently. It's incredibly flexible and expressive, but that often confuses developers who have programmed in other languages. Actually, when most developers express frustration with JavaScript, they're usually having problems with the browser APIs. Events and document object model manipulation often cause the most grief. So let's recap. Your web page is created using three components. your content is defined in HTML, your layout and styles are defined in CSS, and your functionality is defined in JavaScript. You should try and keep them as separate as possible, but in reality there is a little crossover. So for example, you might need to define an extra element or ID in your HTML just because you need to hook in functionality or styles. Also, modern HTML5 and CSS3 techniques such as animation allow you to implement some effects which would have required JavaScript a few years ago.